Hello everyone, and welcome to today's live internet broadcast where we're going to be talking about how we can use human data to optimize our teams. But before we get started, I've got a few just opening housekeeping announcements. If you have not already joined us, we're actually broadcasting live in 4K video on Facebook.com at facebook.com/nextafterinc. So if you want to see me and Dr. Coker today in live 4K video, you can head over there. And I want to tell you a little bit about the Nonprofit Innovation and Optimization Summit. This is the third year that we've hosted the summit, and this year we're going to be in San Antonio, Texas, September 27 and 28. And we have brought some incredibly talented marketing thought leaders from across the globe. I mean, we have people that are coming as far from Sweden and from Belgium and in Estonia and the UK. We've got some really incredible folks, including the head of Google AdWords grants that will be there on site. So hope you can make it September 27, 28. We will be in the historic Aztec Theater in downtown San Antonio. It is such a cool venue. And we've got a whole bunch of fun planned as well. The Asthmatics will be joining us at the conclusion of day one for our big Neo Summit party. And if you are the creative type, you can potentially even score free tickets. So every year we like to have a number of kind of fun bootleg t-shirts with different designs. And we're looking for some of you to help us come up with some new ideas for t-shirts. So if you can come up with a concept, you don't even have to be a designer. You could do it in Word or PowerPoint or just send us an email with your idea. But send that to us. Go to neosummit.com, niosummit.com/t-shirt, and send us your idea and for a chance to win 2 free tickets to the Neo Summit. If you're just joining, we are also broadcasting live at facebook.com/nextafterinc, so you can see us in 4K video. And a few just quick housekeeping announcements and we'll get started. We are making a recording of today's broadcast, which we will be sending out after the conclusion of the broadcast for anybody that's missed it or for you to pass along to colleagues. We also are going to include links to all of the different resources and experiments that we cover during today's presentation. And we want this to not just be a monologue or even just a dialogue between me and our special guest, but we want this to be a dialogue with you. And so you can actually send us your questions and interact with us live. If you're using GoToWebinar, you can use the questions panel, type your question in there. Those will be fed to us here, and we'll be able to respond to those. Or if you are on Facebook and looking at the Facebook Live broadcast, you can simply just type your questions in there. We will field them from there. So I am very, very excited to introduce our special guest. So Dr. Coker is with us here. We're in the Jacksonville offices today. And Dr. Coker is probably one of the most interesting guys I've ever met in my life. I mean, you're the essential Renaissance man. So Taekwondo Grandmaster, he's trained 560 or 500 or 600 black belts, right?
Yes.
He's got 9 kids, 6 grandkids so far, right?
So
More
far.
on the way. And Dr. Coker is an incredibly talented person at using human data to be able to drive business decisions. And I'll tell you a little bit about the story about how I met him and how he's transformed the way you're thinking. But Dr. Coker and his firm, LifeThrive, has partnered with NextAfter, and we have come together to deliver a really interesting study. And we were trying to understand really how many nonprofit organizations are really, dealing with these kind of people issues within their organizations. And at NextAfter, we're constantly focusing on how to optimize fundraising. But something occurred to us. We can get everybody's CRM data or email data and web analytic data. We can analyze that, and we can come up with ways to be able to optimize a fundraising program. But if we don't have the right people in place, if we don't have the right team around this plan, then oftentimes our plans will fail. And so we wanted to explore that together, didn't we, Doc?
We did indeed. Thank you, Tim.
All right. So I want to get into this a little bit. So we started with, there's 2 kind of components to the study. The first part is a primary-based study. So we actually surveyed a number of people that work in the not-for-profit space, and these are people that are executives or middle management or even fundraising practitioners.
Yes.
And we also interviewed some people that work around the nonprofit sector, so agencies and consultants. Right?
Exactly. Yes, after the NIO conference this past year, we asked the people that attended to participate. And they were very gracious, jumped right in, took the assessments that gave us a very strong foundation in understanding the psychological makeup of each one of those three different job levels you addressed.
Interesting. And the first thing that kind of jumped out when we did this primary part of the research study is that nonprofits seem to be hiring at random. I mean, at least based on some of the responses we saw, right?
They do. And you know, the sad thing about it is if a person has their emotions tied up or if they agree with the cause, then they're willing to jump in. But oftentimes that doesn't mean they have the skill sets to do what's necessary to really push the nonprofit forward. And we actually discovered that 61% of the hiring managers use resumes, which according to the Harvard Business Review and University of Michigan studies are only 14% effective.
Interesting. And don't a lot of people oftentimes, embellish, shall we say,
Oh gosh.
their resumes?
Boy, do they. Recent studies show that 58% of the people actively admit to either lying or embellishing on their resume
Yikes.
so that they can get a job. And what's funny is just this past week there was some information released that showed that CEOs turn over on an average of every 5 years, but over 40% of the reason that they turn over during that time was for embellishing their resume or putting things on their resume that weren't in fact true.
Well, the other thing that was interesting that came from this survey is that we found that a pretty large number of organizations have job roles that are not tailored to the different behavioral skills necessary to get those jobs done. I thought that number is pretty high.
It is, because when people are emotionally involved in the cause, they'll volunteer to do anything. And the challenge is that the organizations, the nonprofits, are not taking the time to understand what is actually required by the job. So if someone says they can do it, then they bring them on because of the emotion involved, but they don't really understand what they're getting into.
That's interesting. And by the way, again, all of this data came from a survey that we sent out, and we asked people these questions. So we're not making this stuff up. We're not just using other sources. So we actually did interviews with folks, and we did also some more in-depth ones, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But the other thing that kind of jumped out is that it seems that a lot of the jobs that are being crafted within different nonprofit organizations lead to a dead end. I mean, what's up with that, Chuck?
They do, and the scary part about it is that there's no career development, there's no looking ahead at the strategic aspects of the job, which will actually push the nonprofit into achieving their objectives. 54% of employees said that their job descriptions are so general that they have to literally remain flexible and don't really know what they're going to be doing one day to the next.
Well, if these job descriptions are so open-ended and it's kind of like, you have to be the Swiss Army knife of your craft, then it's oftentimes hard for people to understand how to get an A in their job. And then it also probably is why the other thing we found is that only 8% of nonprofit employers are providing people with a full career development process. So where am I going?
They don't know, and that's it. And the sad thing is that after the enthusiasm of working for a cause, driving themselves to a cause where they feel like they're bettering mankind, there's no place to go. And that's why the turnover is so very high in the nonprofit sector.
Well, it's a funny thing you mentioned turnover, because that was actually something we looked at as well. We asked people, what's up with retention of your key talented employees at organizations? And we got reports that retention is a problem.
Yeah, 68% of the people actually believe that there's a wrong person in a position. In other words, they're either not qualified, they don't have the skill sets, or they just don't match for some reason. And when you plug that into a culture, it literally shapes or misshapes the culture and doesn't allow them to achieve what they're after.
What's interesting was that 53% of people reported that they believe that their management right? The management level people are not qualified or competent for your role. Chuck, it's incredible.
It's crazy, but you know, oftentimes the leaders of these organizations are very strong communicators, they're charismatic, and they really get you to believe in the cause. The challenge is they're not strategic, they're not thinking ahead of how to use the mission, vision, and values of the organization to actually achieve their objective.
Right, and as we get later into the study, where we actually did behavioral assessments with 500 individuals, we'll have some data that will prove that, won't we, Chuck?
We will indeed, and the important thing is that if nonprofits will take a look at this data and just try to sink in and identify what aspects are necessary for the job, it can literally revolutionize the way that they approach their market.
Right. So given these factors, it's no wonder that over 70% reported turnover, especially for kind of the practitioner or the level, the first level folks at the organization, and 40% reported turnover issues of any sort. So all these factors kind of stack on top.
It's scary because with each person that turns over, you lose knowledge, you lose experience, you lose the ability to transfer to the donor base. What is really important and critical. And Tim, as you and I have learned over the years, if you don't have that knowledge management on a continuing basis, the donors fall away and that giving starts to drop off. Right.
Well, I don't know about you, but to me, when I first saw some of the stats, I felt like this was kind of, it's like a cold glass of water. And actually, I got to tell you a funny story. So I was having breakfast this morning, and I'm in the restaurant, and the waiter drops this glass bottle on the table, which shatters and makes a loud noise, and literally just like dumps all this water in my lap, which is kind of like a fun way to start your day. And if you're like me, like some of these stats probably feel like that. And this is actually something I experienced personally. So let me just tell you a quick little story about why I stink at hiring people. So in the early stages of Next After, as we kind of transition from being just this sole entrepreneur into being a fully scaled organization, I had to start hiring people. And the problem was I didn't really know what to do. So I did what I instinctively thought was right. I reviewed resumes, but more importantly, I actually went after people that I had been working with for many years in different companies. These may have been people that were industry allies, and they were extraordinarily talented individuals, very, very capable and very, very successful folks. But what happened is, when they got into our structure, it didn't work, and it was really painful because these are people that were very good friends, that we shared the same values and passions of using data to drive better decision making in fundraising, and so it caused a lot of pain for us as an organization. And so I kind of waved the white hanky. I said, you know what, I give up. I'm actually clearly not doing this right. And I reached out to Dr. Coker on LinkedIn. And I said, hey, I know that there's a process to this, and so I'm pretty sure that we're not doing it. So what he did is he came into our organization and he put our entire team, he said, if we're going to work on professional development, we have to start with personal formation. And so what he did is he gave our team a battery of different assessments. And the one assessment in particular that we looked at was the TriMetrics report. Yes. And can you tell us just a little bit about what is contained in that kind of report?
Sure. The TriMetrics gives us multiple layers of an individual. And you see the problem with most companies is they give personality tests, but it only goes to the surface level. You have to look at multiple levels of an individual to understand not just if they can do the job well, but will they fit into the culture. And that's where most people make their mistakes. So we measure behavior and we identify, okay, what's the pace? How are they going to present themselves, and how are they going to react in these circumstances? But the next thing that's very, very important is how do they think? How do they prioritize the way they work? And you see, that's where the challenge came in, Tim, was the fact that you had good people, but the methodology that you're using at Next After is not the methodology that most organizations use. That's why you're successful and they're not. But the important thing to remember is that with that mindset of the individual, we're looking at the way they literally are culturally forced to use their brain. And in doing that, when you mix that with the behaviors, you come out with a third dimension of, okay, what's the mental resume look like? And when you have the mental resume, you now know, can they do the job? Will they do the job? Will they fit into our culture? And do they have the capacity to expand and develop for the person you're going to need tomorrow, not just today?
So when we first encountered this at Next After, and he took our entire team through this assessment, we learned a lot about ourselves, but we also learned a lot about each other. And that was incredibly useful because there's many points of friction in the past that we had, and what we thought were conflicts of personality or behavior was actually us covering each other. Because I had certain deficiencies that other people were stronger in. And because they provided a different perspective, together as a team, we were better than just the sum of our parts. It was a multiplication.
Your clients are expecting you to help them identify ways to improve the comeback, the donor base. And if you're not doing that internally, you can't do that externally.
So we were just discussing what the Trimetrics report is going to unfold, and actually, as a way just to illustrate that, Chuck, what I have prepared today, and I don't mean to spring this on you, but I actually have my test results.
Wonderful.
So I'm gonna go ahead and just put myself on full display for everyone to see, and Chuck, I would like you to do what you have done for us many, many times. I'd like you to go ahead and read my palm today. Right?
Oh, okay. Well, the important thing to look at on the graph on the left, which I talked about just a minute ago as the behaviors, it indicates the pace and the way that the person is going to express themselves. And with it, in Tim's case, you see the high red and the high yellow are very, very dominant. That means that he's a strategic thinker. He's going to move at a very fast pace, and he's going to communicate with you in a way that illustrates how he has learned and the way that he has picked up through experience to be successful. And it's that fast pace that makes him move quickly and push the people along behind them to move quickly too. But you also notice there's some low green and some low blue.
Yeah, what's that all about?
And that tells us that I don't want to do the same thing twice. And so when you're looking at data, this allows him to get out there and look at data from wholly different perspectives. And that's good for clients, because if they looked at the data the same way, same thing, they're going to be doing the same things. And you and I both know that our donor audience is in constant state of change.
So why is there two sets of graphs? Can you explain the difference between the adapted style and the natural style?
Sure. The adapted style is who Tim is when he's home in his pajamas. This is who Tim is naturally.
Heaven help my wife, right? Heaven help her, 100% D.
But on the left-hand side, the adapted style illustrates that you become much more of a communicator. You bring out the softer edges rather than that driving force that's really pushing you to help your clients. And the dominance goes down a little bit so that you're trying to enlist people's help rather than forcing them to take a specific path.
Great. And what about the next series of graphs there?
The next graphs tell us about Tim externally and internally, because most people have an image of themselves, but they also put on, shall we say, a facade to look better in public, put their best foot forward, whatever you want to call it. And what you can see is that in Tim's case, both his external factors and his internal factors are fairly balanced. In other words, what you see with Tim is what you get. The real individual as well as the person that you see in public.
And my favorite part, the values. So tell us about the values.
Yes, the values or mindsets are critical. The first two bars indicate objectivity or the relationship to a task. The second two bars indicate subjectivity or how a person responds to their environment or people. And the third set of bars there, the black and the gray, indicate the beliefs both in themselves and in the system that they believe orders and structures the world. As you can see from Tim's graphs, he's very objective, and that's the part of him that says, I need more data. But the key thing is that his individualism is high, so he's going to take a great amount of pride in the work that he does, so that when he produces the work, which the blue, the social, is saying, I care about other people, I care about their causes much more than the national norms. And so therefore, I'm going to take my data, I'm going to take my desire to do a job with excellence, but I'm going to use it to serve people.
Wow. I mean, you've just basically described really what I aspire to be and hope to be. So that's really interesting. Now, what we did, this is the cool part about this study, and I think it actually makes it very, very unique. We had the opportunity to have 500 people that work in the not-for-profit space take these assessments. And typically, when we do these as part of our pre-screening hiring process, I mean, it's like $400. So, I mean, this is like a really very valuable tool, and you get 60-some pages of data back. And Dr. Coker and the folks that make the test, TTI, offered the opportunity for our community to be able to take these assessments for free. And we had 500 people that took these.
We did.
So now we had a substantial sample of data, right? And these are 45-minute assessments to take. So we learned some pretty interesting stuff, right?
We did indeed.
The first thing that was really cool is that nonprofit employees have a very elevated levels of empathy and optimism. Tell me about that, Chuck.
Yes. The whole concept of what a nonprofit does is reaching people and meeting their needs where they're not normally met. Just falls right in place with this. I can do something. I'm optimistic. I can reach in there. I can make a difference. And also, I empathize with the plight of this individual.
Yeah, and you can see from these graphs here, so it's the graph on the right-hand side is the one that indicates on
the left hand. Now, that is the dimensions of the individual that work in there. And you see the understanding of others and the practical thinking and the desire to be a part of a system is much stronger than the national norms. So these people care.
They care, right? Yeah, there's those graphs about the understanding others and being empathetic and wanting to help.
Exactly.
So it's really interesting to see that this human data that can be collected through these different instruments
Absolutely. And
can help explain the way we are that we are, right? I mean,
exactly. And you know, the challenge is that many people are programmed or taught to interview. And we have to sort through that. And the only way to do that is with data. The same way that you work with your clients to identify, is this going to work or isn't it?
Right, exactly. So the other thing that was kind of interesting from the study is we learned that this strategic focus seems to be missing from the executive suite. So what's up with that, Chuck? What does that mean?
Well, the key is basically this. The people that are leading nonprofits have a cause, they're eat up with emotion about it, and they're out there trying to persuade people. That's that optimism, that strong communication level, but they're not the task-driven type of people that says, if I do this, this will happen, and if I do this, this will occur. In other words, they did not have the strategic ability to think ahead and make those pre-programmed changes that will adjust for the market, like many CEOs in the corporate workplace do.
So that's kind of what this slide shows us here. So the corporate executives have a much higher dominance components.
Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, they're not afraid to step on toes. And the difference with the nonprofit people is they're much more sensitive to people and their needs. And therefore, what they do is they literally pull the ability to make the right decisions for the future out of the process when they should be pushing harder to achieve their goal and objective and make every penny that's donated to that nonprofit have some sort of impact.
Interesting. And because we're able to survey people in executive leadership, middle managers,
Yes.
and on-the-ground fundraising practitioners, we're able to kind of look at this across the spectrum. What was interesting is that actually middle managers were more task-oriented than than their bosses.
That's true. They are the people that are literally looked to and relied upon to make things happen in the organization. The executive is out there talking the talk and all of that, but he's not the one making things happen. The mid-level managers have to be task-oriented to push the people to achieve.
And then practitioners, very, 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 very people-focused individuals.
Oh my gosh.
83% people.
Are they people focused? They are so people focused that they would rather talk about their cause than do something about their cause. And folks, listen, I understand. I've overseen a nonprofit for 35 years, and I understand the emotion that's involved in this, but the task orientation that needs to be there is often lost in the emotion of the cause.
Yeah. Well, I think that was fascinating. I thought which was the most alarming thing from this study is this next point, that there was actually a scarcity of resourcefulness
Yes.
within the kind of practitioner, on the ground kind of people, fundraising practitioners. And I thought that this is really strange because we work in an industry where we constantly have to be MacGyver, right? I've got to say, what do I have on my desk to build a fundraising
Exactly.
campaign? And to see the fact that 63% of nonprofit practitioners' motives are more, about collaboration, altruism than efficiency and effectiveness is not a good thing, is it?
No, it's really not. And the challenge is that the people that are the practitioners, the people working within the organization, are looking to the strategy of the leader, the strategy of the managers, and they're perfectly willing to commit, they're perfectly willing to do, but they are not resourceful enough because the strategy that's being laid is not resourceful enough, and the pre-planning is not deep enough. So what they do is basically what they're told, and in that type of arena, they have lost, how do I think creatively? And that's why organizations such as Next After and agencies are out there having to scour and bring in the new ideas and concepts, because the practitioners will do whatever you ask them to do. They're emotionally attached to things, but they're just not thinking outside the box.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think optimization is such a powerful concept within the nonprofit space, because we're constantly having to do more with less. We're having to use constrained resources to accomplish the impossible, right? Getting somebody to make an irrational decision to say, I'm going to go give my money so that this person on the other side of the cause is able to experience the benefit. And I think that that's just incredibly powerful when we can actually optimize that a bit. So another thing that was interesting is that the nonprofit industry seems that it may be suffering from self-esteem issues. So what does that mean, Chuck?
Well, when an individual is so invested in a cause, they put themselves, shall we say, in the back seat. And so they get emotionally attached to the cause, and they work towards the cause, neglecting their own needs. And the challenge is that what most people miss is the fact that if you're not healthy, you can't make other people healthy. And in the nonprofit community, the people are so self-sacrificial that they don't really push the ideas and concepts that they actually have better ideas for than the people out there. And that's the reason they're in the nonprofit business. They're supposed to be experts in their area. They're supposed to know how to reach people that we can't reach. That's why we're willing to donate to them. So when they don't honor or have the self-respect at such a high level to say, stop, I've got a better idea. I know how to do this. And if you'll follow me, I'll make this happen.
So, in other words, I mean, and maybe this is not the right way to say this, but could altruism, actually be a curse sometimes?
Well, it can, if you're the one in charge of executing the best use of the funds. And the important thing to remember is that it's critical that we care about the people that we're serving, but it's also critically important that we make the best use and we become the most effective and efficient person we can to ensure that the cause meets the goals and objectives.
It's kind of like on the airplane, they say, you know, before helping others and children, right, make sure that you put your own oxygen mask on. Because if you're not breathing, you ain't helping anybody.
That's right. Absolutely.
Right. Well, I know we went through a number of these things very, very quickly, but the cool thing about it is everybody that's on today's broadcast, you're going to be the first ones to see this study. So we are literally just launching it today. You can go to nextafter.com/human data and download the complete study. I think it's over 50 some pages. But we really want to open this up for questions. There's a whole bunch more in there. We get into this whole issue of like consultancies and agencies and how they interact with nonprofits based off of this kind of data. And so, you know, what we want to do now is we want to take some questions from the audience. So if you have some questions, you can go ahead and type them into the question module on GoToWebinar, or you can actually just send them directly through Facebook Live. And they will be sent over to me, if I can get my phone to work here. So the first question comes in. So Chuck, these assessments are kind of cool, right?
Yes.
You know, but it sounds like you had a limited number of freebies to give out. So what about if there's people that are on today's broadcast that would like to take similar assessments? Yes.
On our website, we provide free assessments that will give you the behaviors, values. We also have a conflict questionnaire that helps you understand how you can deal with conflict. But all of these are free to you at no cost. And here's what I would suggest. Since we know that 92% of the nonprofits out there do not have a basis for understanding what the needs are for the particular roles or how to screen that in, we want you to take these assessments and use them because they may not be as in-depth as the ones that we used for NIO conference participants, but at least they will give you something to start with. They will give you ideas and concepts of who the person is that you're working with, and do they have the behaviors and the mental priorities to do the job the way that you want it done.
So here's another question. Thank you, Chuck, by the way, and thank you for the generous offer. I hope folks can take advantage of that. You can go to lifethrive.com/free-assessments-1 and take that free assessment. Question, so how do you use this human data to map behaviors to job profiles? Like, what does that process look like?
Well, when an individual has a specific pace, for example, we know that salespeople have to move a little bit faster than programmers. And the behavioral data tells us how they will approach the job itself. What's the pace? What are the thought processes? How are they going to use that genetic behavior that they were born with? And then the second aspect, the mindsets or the value sets, tells us how they prioritize things. And for example, like Next After, we know that there were 3 priorities there. Theoretical, we want to get the data. We want to make sure our clients have the right data. Utilitarian, we're not going to waste their time. We're going to be on time. We're going to deliver. But social, we don't care who comes up with the idea as long as it meets the needs. And those are the 3 values that stood out for Next After. But those may be very different for your organization.
So how do you go through the process of actually understanding, you know, which values are most relevant to your organization, to your culture? I mean, how do you kind of define that so that you know that you're getting the right people that match?
That's a good question. We have what's called a job analysis report also on our website, and all you have to do is send us an email and request that. And what you'll do is you'll have your subject matter experts complete that report, and it will literally draw a behavior value profile for you so that you know what to look for, what to interview for, and even what questions to ask during the interview process, Tim.
Well, and actually, we're going through this process ourselves at Next After, and it's a really rigorous process. It's actually quite a challenging one. I mean, we have to actually go through, and we have a separate panel of different people that go through and actually, you know, identify those different those core competencies type of thing. We stack rank those then they go through a normalization process, and then you kind of take a look at those, and we make sure that those specific competencies are mapped appropriately and that there's agreement, right, that they map to the job description itself.
Exactly. We take those subject matter experts, whether it be 5, 10, 20 people, and we combine it and we develop the averages and the means. What's the flexibility area so that we know one thing's going to happen. You're not going to hire the perfect person. There's no such thing. But we also need to know where those variables are so that we can train and develop them into their career in the organization.
Okay, so here's a question. So if I'm hiring an executive level person, right? How can I use this cultural data to be able to make sure that this is the right key leader for my organization? What are some of the things that I should be looking at if we have them take this assessment?
Well, I think the question that's been asked is critical because oftentimes the behavior is not as important as the values of the individual, and the values of the individual is what actually builds an organizational culture. And that organizational culture is very definable based on the people that are working there. So as we look at the organization's value makeup, we can then set a benchmark so that if the new executive comes in and he's out in left field and compared, it's not going to work.
Interesting. Well, if you have any more questions, please feel free to submit them. We're still kind of getting some that are kind of coming through here. But Chuck, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
If I were to, from the very beginning, start this whole kind of, process of using human-based data, what's the first thing that I should be doing as the leader of my organization?
Well, I think you have to ask yourself, what are you trying to accomplish? The mission, vision, and values are critical. Once those mission, vision, and values are established, then you can literally map those out as to what kind of human data is necessary to meet those criteria. Just like in your organization, it's important that we have certain characteristics. Then once it's mapped out, you then look at the individual jobs that need to be filled within those organizations. Now the values are going to remain fairly consistent, but the behaviors are going to be variable. And that's the good thing that we saw. Last year at the NIO conference, we actually looked at the behavioral makeup of Next After, if you'll remember. And what we saw is that the behaviors were almost flatlined when we averaged everything. So there was good diversity of behavior, but there was a very distinct pattern of the values or the mindsets that you were all headed in the same direction. And if you're not, there's going to be clashing. See, we learn to get along with people that are different, but if we have different priorities, that's where we're going to clash.
Here's a question. Can people really change?
Good question. Anyone can change if they have a desire to. What we find is that people don't normally change unless there's a traumatic event in their life or some significant life change. In my own life, it was the death of a spouse that just made me rearrange and look at life a bit differently. Change is there and it's available to you, but you really have to want it. One of the interesting things that perhaps the audience doesn't know is that self-help books sell almost 50% of the books that are out there, but less than 3% of them are actually read from cover to cover. People want to change, but they don't want to make the effort. And the key is if you want to change, we can help you do that, but you have to invest yourself in the process.
Here's another question. Any suggestions for how to use data or assessment results to develop existing staff?
Oh, absolutely. When you take the job analysis that we talked about a little earlier, and you have people that are in a role and they're not specifically attuned there, you have two options. modify the job description, change some of the responsibilities between other people in the organization, or put them into a developmental program or an improvement program that will help them develop the skills that are necessary to move into that. You see, we have primary or instinctive behaviors, but we also have learned behaviors, Tim. And the instinctive behaviors are going to be our gut reaction, but the learned behaviors can shift those instinctive behaviors over a period of time.
Interesting. And I can even just speak from experience. I know that one of the first things we did once we actually went through and took all the assessments is you gave us kind of like a 30-day personal formation journey that we went through, where we actually went and started to kind of apply some of the things we learned about ourselves to be able to get greater clarity on how that impacts other people on our team, and how it actually will help us to be able to achieve whatever goals and objectives that we set for our own individual lives and self. And that's what's so cool about this stuff is it's a way to be able to tell your staff that this is not, I don't just care about you to the extent that you can actually help our organization do what we do. I care about you as a person and as you growing and developing and becoming a better human being. And that's what's so cool about this stuff.
And the problem is that so few companies are willing to invest in their people that way, and they don't use the resources that they have to invest in that career development process. As we saw earlier, 92% don't, only 8% do. And when that happens, that has a huge impact on retention. When a person knows that they can grow and they develop, they're not in a hurry to leave. But this can also apply to your donors, Tim. As we learned at the last NIO conference, you can literally benchmark who your donors are. What are their priorities? What are their behaviors and their values? And reattune your messaging to those donors to make it comply with and meet the needs of their constituency.
I wrote a blog post once. We were reading like some book at some other company I worked at years ago. It was like 7 something dimensions or whatever. And I boiled it down to 3 things. I said, do I matter, right? If I don't matter within the context of the company, then I'm not going to stick around. I'm not going to be successful. I'm not going to be fulfilled, right? Does the company matter? Does what we do actually matter? Does it make a difference? Does it help in some way? Does it change the world, right? And then finally, like, does what I do within that organization matter? Like, if I don't have answers to all of those 3 questions, I don't see how anybody could be an engaged employee, right?
That's so true.
Here's another question that came in. So we have a small team, about 10 people. What assessments would you recommend us to take to help optimize our team? We'd like to get much better match between our roles, tasks, and our personality skills.
Well, that's critical. I would suggest that we start with something like the trimetrics, because what that does is it gives us that multi-dimensional look at the individual. And then as we analyze their roles, we may have them in 80% of their key performance indicators, but 20% of their key performance indicators are out of whack. And that's where we can make the moves and move things around the way that it needs to be done. But here's the thing. If you are going to dig down with your team, they need to understand themselves in the context of how other people see them, not how they see themselves. You see, that's where the personal formation process kicks in and is so important. We all have this image of ourselves because we rationalize and have our biases. But when each team member understands how others perceive them, then they say, okay, the other person's not crazy, they're just different.
Right.
And therefore, I'm willing to make this flex and this and that. The other key thing is that with the value aspect, or the second tier of this, we can then make sure that our values are aligned and our corporate culture comes into line. Without that, you can bring the #1 expert in the world into your organization, but if the values are not aligned, you're in trouble right away. And you and I have seen that in your own organization. Perfectly wonderful man, absolutely fantastic, great heart, giving heart, but he was just not aligned with the job itself.
Yeah. And I know that like as we went through that process too, like I learned some things. Like I had, like Jeff and Kevin, like we have like this friction sometimes, and like I go in, I'm like, yes, let's go do this new thing, and they're like, yeah, but what about this? And what about that? What about this? And I'm just like, cold water, right? Cold water in the lap at breakfast time. But what I learned from this assessment is that I have a deficiency. One of my deficiencies is that I leap before I look, right?
Yes.
I jump right in. Now I've got this kind of other thing that actually helps me get out of trouble, right? So I can kind of make it work, you know what I mean? Yes. But it makes other people crazy, you know what I mean? It makes them very, very uneasy. What Jeff and Kevin have the ability to do is to see around corners, which I can't do. So me interpreting that as being cold water on my lap, it was actually them just trying to help me see the things I couldn't see. And once I understood that, it changes everything. It's like, knowledge, is everything.
It does. The funny thing is that companies are big on the concept of diversity. The problem is that diversity is not about religion. It's not about color of your skin or where you come from. Diversity is up here. Diversity in the way that you look, approach, prioritize, and those kind of things. Your skin color doesn't matter. Your religion doesn't matter. The key is there diversity in thought that will bring a full spectrum of abilities to the organization that will maximize customer satisfaction.
Right. So going back to that, and that's exactly right. I mean, that's what it's healthy conflict is what it was, right? It's healthy friction.
Yes.
Because that's the only way you can get a fire started, right? But okay, so here's going back to that previous question. I mean, you're certified in like 1,000 different assessments, and there's so many. Like there's strength finders, there's DISC, there's trimetrics, there's quality mode. I mean, like, there's all these different ones.
Sure.
So going back to that person's question, small organization, which assessments should they be looking at? I mean, which one should they be taking?
Well, again, for the cost, they need to use multiple assessments. And I'm going to tell you this, I can sell you just about any test you want, but multivariate analysis is 93% effective. If you use one assessment, the best you're going to hope for is about 49% effective. With two, you get up to maybe 60%. But when you add that third dimension, it's kind of like cross-targeting, like
triangulation.
Triangulation.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
That's exactly it. And that's what you're doing with data when you research for your nonprofits. You have to triangulate to make that happen. And there are, shall we say, two of the three that a small organization could start with that reduces the cost significantly. But you can't afford to go down to one test. One test will never tell you everything you need to know.
Okay. So that might help answer this second question, because I think what you've told me in the past is that having multiple different kind of instruments, they validate each other, right?
Yes.
But this question is, have you seen people take a survey like this or an assessment and not want to come off as like, a jerk or a bad person, so they try to show more sensitive qualities when they're answering the question? Meaning, have you ever seen people try to game one of your tests?
Oh yes, absolutely. People try to do it all the time.
I think I know one of them, actually. Yes. I think I hired one.
And that's one of the reasons with the multivariate analysis that we're able to triangulate. We're able to see, because the extroverts are naturally going to try to make you see the best of them. The introverts will often overthink the process and literally minimize their own task and skills in the way that they present themselves in some of these assessments. So the multivariate analysis helps us find that. So we have validity factors in some of our assessments that will literally tell you this person is pushing the envelope. They're not really who they say they are. So let's move on.
Somebody just said, can you repeat the percent effectiveness of just using a single test versus multiple?
Yes, a single assessment at best is going to give you a 49% accuracy rate. And you can say, wow, that's better than resumes. Resumes are only 14%. Yes, but the problem is that if 70% of the people are turning over under 5 years, can you really afford a 49%.
I mean, 49% is a coin flip, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's like, should we hire them or should we not? Let's consult the magic 8 ball, right?
You're just guessing better.
Right, exactly.
You have to get up to a higher level to make sure that you're doing that. And this is not about trying to sell things and make money. I'm just telling you that in the long run, turnover is costing you big bucks.
Right.
Turnover is hurting your knowledge management process. Turning people over kills your donor base, any way you look at it.
Yeah. So let me ask, is there an example of a good multivariate test that they should look at?
Yes, I would suggest something like the trimetrics.
Trimetrics.
And people, I will be happy if the CEO of an organization wants to take this, look at it. They send an email to livethrive.com. I'll comp them the first one, and if it doesn't do what they want, they haven't lost a thing.
Great. Well, awesome. Well, that's great. I've got one other question here, and I think we're coming to the end of our time here, but I know that one of the things that you're really passionate about is emotional intelligence. Right?
Yes.
And you've done a lot of work studying that, and you're actually developing a new instrument, and along with some of your other colleagues in academia and in this space. So can you just share a little bit about what is emotional intelligence? Why is it important?
Emotional intelligence is the study, the information that helps us accomplish things. Rather than how smart am I? You can be very smart, but if you can't accomplish and apply these things through interaction, through working with other people, all of the intelligence in the world doesn't work. There's 5 aspects to emotional intelligence. Self-awareness, and that is, as I mentioned earlier, understanding yourself in the context of other people. And then, can you take that self-awareness and self-regulate it? Can you use it so that it now becomes useful? If you do, you can develop empathy for other people, which is the 3rd factor. You can develop the social skills that will allow you to interact with people, but you also understand how and where does my motivation originate. By understanding those 5 concepts, you literally maximize who you are as an individual. And emotional intelligence has been proved over and over and over and over again to be much more important than IQ.
So would you say that emotional intelligence can make you a better fundraiser? And if so, why?
Oh gosh, yes, absolutely. Because with a greater degree of emotional intelligence, not only do you understand how to build, work within your team, promote your team, grow your team, but you also understand how to communicate the message to your donor base and interact with your donor base in a way that benefits both parties and allows you to maximize the money that they're bringing in. And in August of this year, I've been working in conjunction with a professor from Regent University who has for 7 years been department head on emotional intelligence, and we are actually going to be putting out a course in August of this year that will allow you to not just understand the theory of emotional intelligence, but how do I bring it up? Our studies have already shown that we can improve it 11% with our customer base, but what I'm hoping for is how can we improve it even more?
Well, that'd be interesting. Maybe we could partner together to see how we can actually apply emotional intelligence to our craft in fundraising.
I think that's brilliant.
Because it's interesting about all of this stuff. And the reason why I've loved it so much is because we always talk about that when we're doing fundraising and specifically, digital fundraising optimization. We have to realize that people give to people, right? People don't give to email machines, they don't give to websites, they don't give to any direct mail piece or any other device. They give to people, right? So if we can actually better understand people, what makes them tick, how they think, how they operate, then I think we can actually apply that stuff to be able to craft better messaging that reaches the heart of an individual.
Absolutely. And when we do that, we not only serve our donors better, but we serve the people that we're committed to.
Well, folks, I think we're just about out of time here today. I just want to thank you all for joining us in today's broadcast. I'd encourage you to download the study, nextchapter.com/human data. and take a look at that. And send me your thoughts. Send Dr. Coker your thoughts. We'll get contact information out to you as well at the end of this broadcast. And we would love for you to join us on a future one of these broadcasts. And again, thanks for your time today. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Tim.